welcome into our Nittany Game Week podcast. I'm Todd Sadowski alongside former Nittany Lion coaches Jay Paterno and Tom Bradley. And we got a 1-0 team. We finally have football on tape to talk about. I know these coaches are like kids in a candy store. They always talk about the team improving the most from week 1 to week number 2. And you do that by examining what you just saw, right, guys? And then trying to make those adjustments and move from there. And we heard Coach Franklin talk about it. There's a lot of things they're going to see that they're going to want to adjust and change. But a lot of what they did see and show was pretty positive in that opener. I'd say they aced their test in the first game.
Well, you know, the thing about the opening week, and Tom knows this, is everybody gets excited if you win. Oh, my God, we're going to go win the national championship. PC fans think they're going to win the national. Penn State fans think, USC fans, everybody's excited. And then you have the other half where, like, the sky is falling. And the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. And as coaches, the most important thing you got to do is temper those things and the fan reactions and everybody around your players saying, boy, you guys have made it. You got the big play offense. You got this great defense. And there's going to be a lot of things that happen in the next several weeks as we go. So, I mean, I think you got to temper that. You got to evaluate what was good, what was bad, and get beyond just we scored 34 points, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to me, it's always been that first to second week. Hey, let's go back and look at our fundamentals. Where are we lacking? What didn't we do well? And most of the time, it's usually tackling and things of that nature because you don't usually do as much live tackling against your own guys because you're not going to go against those people. You don't want to get anybody hurt. And at that point, you don't really have your walk-on group, ready to go. So that first week, you want to get out of your system, get ready for week 2. But as we say all the time, you're going to make your most improvement between week 1 and week 2. And because now you're going to go back and start nitpicking all the little things you did wrong.
Yeah, no scrimmages in college football, so you don't really know what you're looking at until you see that first game. And I would argue that the sky in Tallahassee is a little bit more unstable than in some other places as the Seminoles have started 0-2. Okay, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Really showed a lot of balance. 4 different guys scored touchdowns. Once I saw Bo Prabula throw a touchdown pass to Tyler Warren, immediately a post-game question popped in my head for Coach Franklin. Drew Aller has shown what he can do with his legs. Bo Prabula has shown what he can do with his arm. This now becomes something that opponents have got to fear if those guys are improving in those areas. Jay, from an offensive standpoint, Coach Kotelnicki did a really nice job being creative, innovative, and deploying all of his weapons.
Yeah, and again, with week 1, West Virginia doesn't know what's coming. Now, when you start to put things on tape and people are start to say, okay, this is what they do, those kind of things, you have to constantly kind of move the bar, so to speak, and move the cheese. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Who Moved My Cheese? That's what you got to do. You got to keep moving the cheese every week so people can't stay on it. That's why the Tyler Warren touchdown pass is important. If you're going to put Aller out there as a wideout, like they are, you're going to throw on the ball at some point. And in 2002 and 3, we put Zach Mills out there. Mike Robinson was the quarterback, faked the ball to him, throw a touchdown pass to Zach Mills on a wheel route. And then Zach started like, hey, can we put in this form and that? Let's pump the brakes.
Yeah,
but I mean, you have to continually, again, it's like when a starting pitcher gets up to the big leagues for the first 5 or 6 games, nobody knows what he likes to throw on 3 and 2, that kind of stuff. Counts. So that's going to be the challenge going forward as people start to amass some things. But I think, you've at least got the ability to do some different things.
One of the things is once you put that on tape, now as a defensive guy, you could be going, they can do, maybe they'll do that. I better practice this. Now you're playing ghost plays at practice. You're playing stuff that you might never see, but you have to say, well, this could happen. Now we have to start taking some time off to look at those things too, because the variables you can do with the way they're mixing that personnel and their quarterback, it can cause some concern.
And I think the big thing is when you put Aller out there at wideout, they can put a corner on him and play 10 on 9. Is really what it comes down to. So you're going to have to do something where you're moving people around. You don't let them get into that comfort zone.
You mentioned the wideout, and Tom, I want to talk to you about the wide receivers because a lot of the guys are known commodities, those juniors that are returning, Drew Aller, really Bo Prabula as well. And you look for those guys to improve on any weaknesses that they had, and I mentioned that, but Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Tyler Warren. So these are guys that defensive coaches know what are going to happen. Trey Wallace breaks out, has a big game. Julian Fleming, really nice decoy, taking some people with him, doing a nice job with the blocking. Omari Evans catches one deep, shows some speed. Now, from a defensive point of view, you have extra personnel, not just schemes and a new coordinator, but you have extra personnel that you're looking at as well.
Yeah, I was looking at it the other day, and I'm saying if it was me, what I would do, because of being a defensive coach, I'd take that quarterback, Jay, and I'd get him into a bunch set because now – now you have to play the bunch, even though he's irrelevant. You have to figure out how you're going to play. Are we going to, play him man? Are we passing off 1 and 3? How are we going to play the different things in there? Because this creates another problem for you. But if you can get that going, it's just the things in your mind as a defensive coach. So you always got to be thinking which way they're going with it.
Yeah, I will say this: if Drew Aller gets hurt, run the bunch route, the fans are going to be not happy at all. That's the one thing about it.
It's the beauty of the
show. Why you put him out there?
Yeah,
he's going to get hurt. Well, you know what? You can get hurt doing anything.
Right,
so people got just like I said, it's week 1. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of steeper mountains on this trail yet to go.
Yeah, and it's a fun formation that you're not going to see very often. And it was kind of confusing because we're, shooting the video and all of a sudden, Warren catches a touchdown. You see that it was Bo, and then Drew Aller comes over and they're both congratulating him. You're like, whoa, we got both quarterbacks out there doing their thing. So let's switch to the defensive side of the ball. They really flashed a lot of speed. They've had a lot of talent for years. Coach Tom Allen makes his debut, and I really liked to see the lateral movement. Tony Rojas, some of the new guys that are stepping up into bigger roles. Jalen Reed had a fantastic game. We're going to give it away. He had the scrap medal, one of the most prestigious awards, as we like to joke, Tom, that you target it. But Kevin Winston Jr. So you have a pair of safeties now that look really solid. The corners were closing well. They did a nice job on the cornerbacks. We'll eventually give that pass rush a little bit more time to go after the quarterback. What jumped off the page and off the screen for you watching Penn State's defense and Coach Tom Allen work in his debut?
Well, I thought the thing that they were fundamentally, I thought they were very sound. They were committed to what they were doing. They didn't get into a lot of gimmicky things. They didn't have to. They were just playing good football. I thought the tackling was pretty good for the opening game. One of the things you mentioned, the secondary, to me, that secondary is pretty darn good. With now, maybe we can take a few more chances here and add an extra guy into that pass rush and do some different things of that nature. But I thought they were very sound fundamentally.
I think one of the things that I would, again, you're excited about what you're seeing from the safeties. At the same token, you're not as excited because a lot of run plays are getting to them, and they're down around the ball making tackles at 2 and 3 and 4 yards depth. That opens you up for some things over the top. So that they're going to play a team that has the ability to challenge them down the field, throwing the ball on play action passes. That remains to be seen how they'll do with that. I think they'll be fine. You'd like to see the linebackers make more. A team that runs the ball 39, 40 times at you, and your leading tackler at linebackers 5 tackles, you want to see more production out of those guys. Although they made some really good plays in the open field, I think that's going to be a challenge. And again, pass rush is going to be, you look at the way people value things in the NFL now. Pass rush is the number one thing people are spending money on in the NFL. And so I think that's going to be, and the thing is, traditionally, Penn State's been really, really good at that. And they got 2 sacks on the game, and both of them were from down guys. So we'll see what happens.
One of the things is with the pass rush, if you can get there with 4, not have to send the extra guy, it's good. And when you can ever do it with 3, has not to steal a phrase from West Virginia, but that's almost heaven.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention also, though, the Tom Allen effect of not having a head coach. And I think it's been really fascinating to see him, kind of shed some of those responsibilities as a head coach from Indiana and just dive into what he loves about the game, right, is defense. So when we talk about coaches making those adjustments from week 1 to week 2, you got a guy that's excited about what he's doing, doesn't have to worry about the other stuff. Can you imagine, what Coach Allen is like now, that he gets to just look at the defensive side of the ball, make some adjustments, get to know his personnel a little bit more, and just talk to the defense? It's a big deal for him.
There's a lot of other things besides that. It's not just offense and defense. He's got special team things. He's got all the other problems. They've got to talk about the academics. Does somebody miss class? There's all those. He has the discipline problems. Now that's off his plate. He can just focus on what he does best, and that's coach defense.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, to free up that kind of time for a guy that just loves the defensive side of the ball, and he gets a chance to kind of mix in there and mingle with just his guys and worry about the defensive side.
Well, I think the thing also is unique is that Andy Kotelnicki is not coaching a position either. So he's free to coach. He has no responsibility in terms of I got to be in this meeting or that meeting, or I can only focus on the guys I coach. He's got the ability to kind of watch the whole thing, and I think Tom's got the same because he's got a couple of guys with him helping him with the linebackers. So I think both of them kind of have a quasi head coach of their side of the ball role, which allows them to look at all 11. And I think that's going to help on game days.
And one of James Franklin's strengths is the overall seeing of what's going on and just kind of, being that CEO of the organization and making sure he's on top of everything. And I want to bring up the long delay and the lightning and the rain delay. And those are the intangibles As we mentioned in the show, you guys can't go running out there and playing in the game as a coach, but there are things that you can make a difference at. And the preparation and being ready for that particular delay, knowing days ahead of time, this is a possibility with the weather. Let's make sure we're ready for that. Let's learn from the 2017 game that was interrupted with a little less than 8 minutes in the second quarter and a lead, and it was a 3-hour delay, not having food ready, not having, those types of things. So, it seems like a small thing, but the small things add up. So I was impressed with the way that they were able to go about that break on the road when you're in a small locker room in a small place. I thought they did a nice job adjusting to that.
Yeah, no question. I think the momentum that they carried with them at the end of the first half, you worry about, we just had a big drive, but when you go, does that kill our momentum? I think they did a good job coming out right in the second half. And I think one of the things that was different in the second half is they really committed to running the ball, as opposed to the first half. They were throwing it more. They threw, I think, 13 passes in the first half and only 4 or 5 in the second half. But they really made, and I think when you come out of a delay, your timing as it relates to the run game is a lot easier to have than it is with the pass game, and I think that paid off for them.
Well, that's the point you just made. I think is the most important point. Your pass game does suffer, I think, a little bit in those long delays where your run game can pick up where you left off. But then again, you got to give some credit to the Penn State offensive line. We haven't talked about them. It's a newer unit. The cohesiveness there usually is not great early. But, boy, to me, they looked sharp. They're coming off the ball hard. I thought they came out of the break, the long break, I should say, about as well as you can.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime there's uncertainty and you as a staff can help create more certainty and communicate with your players and have them ready to go is good, especially when you don't know when there's going to be another lightning strike that takes it 30 minutes deeper, all that stuff. But they were ready for just about every scenario there. Another scenario that they have to deal with now is the home game schedule. I mean, some would look at it as a great situation, right? They leave Morgantown, and the first thought of mine was, wow, we're not going to see them on the road again until the LA Coliseum against USC, October 12th. That is a long time between road games. So now we've got a home schedule, 2 non-conference opponents with a bye mixed in between, and then homecoming against Illinois. How do you guys see this? You play the schedule that's in front of you, of course. What are the advantages? Are there any disadvantages to being at home for so long and not having kind of a big contest here for 2-3 weeks?
Well, I think one of the things that Tom and I were talking earlier about, if you could go back 6 months and move the Kent State game up a week and not have the bye before Kent State and have 3 non-conference games and go a week off before you go to play Illinois would have been better. But you can't do anything about that now. The disadvantages for people that live in state colleges for the next 5 weeks, 4 home games in a row, you got people showing up at your house, eating your food, sleeping on your couch, parking their cars in your driveway, and it's a pain. And believe me, people in state college, and they see 4 home games in a row, every one of them goes, oh, God. But, that's what it is. But I think, the reality is with the younger, there's still some new guys in certain spots. And to that next road game being at USC, it's a long road game. But the flip side of that is in October, there's only 1 home game. And, they play UCLA on the 5th of October. And then we won't see them at home at Beaver Stadium until Ohio State comes in the second. So you never get anything for free. You get these 4 home games, and then you get this month without it. But I think for a team, home is familiar, home is comfortable. The schedule is not too heavy as it relates to those 4 home games. So, you should come out of this thing 5-0 if you really look at it.
But I always felt that the road game was such an important bonding type deal. It's just you're going out there's just you against everybody else, and you get to travel with everybody. You spend more. The players get to actually spend a lot of time with each other. You're on the bus, then the plane, and they get to really get to know each other a lot better when they're on a road trip. So the schedule, it is what it is. They got to play the schedule. There's nothing you can do about it. But it'll be interesting to see how it develops. Down the road here, obviously.
Yeah. Well, it's a valuable experience, to start out on the road, like you mentioned, Tom, with that bonding. And now, the guys that are competing for positions, this is your time. And even with new redshirt rules, there's guys that, you probably might be looking at redshirting. They're probably going to get in some time at Beaver Stadium to get that experience. And what a thrill that's going to be for a lot of the new guys to play right in front of the home crowd. So, all right, so get ready for a lot of home games coming up in the next 5 weeks for sure. And get ready for some fan questions questions now. And please, we want this to be interactive. We want you to go ahead and participate in what we're doing in our weekly podcast. Send in your questions and we'll take them. We'll answer as many as we can as we get things rolling here. We have our first question that comes from John McCullough. And he says, I'm an 07 grad and lifetime fan. What's it going to take to crack the glass top 5 ceiling that seems dominated by the same teams? And do we see that happening anytime soon? John also mentions that, Coach Franklin had mentioned that there's 10 wins doesn't necessarily satisfy the populace and the program. Well, that's the case at a lot of schools that we were discussing as well. It wouldn't fly for a lot. But I think there's always, the nuances of it, guys, is, well, what do your 10 wins look like as opposed to, your 9 and 8 wins? And I think that's where the nuances come in for Penn State, because the schedule just hasn't set up where there's a lot of top 25 opponents, which is why I think the Big Ten expanding is really, really cool, and why the USC win over LSU is such an important win, not just to the Big Ten, not just to USC, but to Penn State as well, because that you want a road team that is ranked. You want that challenge when you're getting looked at later on in the year. So, talk about that glass top 5 ceiling that we're trying to break, not just by making the playoff, but having some success once you get there.
Well, to break that top 5 ceiling, you got to beat them. I mean, that's the end of the day. You got to when you play a top 5 team, you got to win the game. Because until you do that, you're not. And when you talk about 10 wins, I think not just here at Penn State, but at a lot of schools. I mean, that's not unique to here. Is that if you go 10-2 every year at Alabama, they're not going to be happy either. But I think what it is, the money has gotten so big, and the investments that are made in the college football programs are so big. I mean, when you talk about what Penn State has put into the football program, between the stadium renovation, the Lash building, the practice fields, and James's salary, you're at $1 billion. That's with a B. So when you start putting $1 billion into something like this, the expectation is that you're going to see those kind of results. Now, they may come as we go, and you certainly hope they will. But that's why I think there's a little bit of antsiness. There's a little bit of, hey, we haven't quite gotten there yet. And whether that's fair or not, that's for other people to decide. But that's the root cause of the expectations that you have. And when you step into a place at Penn State, you understand that. And whether it's Alabama, Ohio State, look at Ryan Day, he's 57-8 or whatever his record is, and they're antsy because he didn't beat the right team 2 or 3 times. It's the nature of the game. And now, for the players, it's going to be even worse now, because a year from now, they're going to get paid a lot of money. You're talking maybe $15, $16 million payroll in revenue sharing. That's going to be $150,000 to $160,000 per player. The fans are going to want to see. They're not going to be They're not going to be patient and say, "Well, let them develop." They say, "We're paying these guys good money." So we professionalize the game, is what it comes down to.
But that's the thing. That at Penn State when you come here, what the expectations are. It's not like when you, as a player, you came there as a coach, like, oh well, they're going to be happy with 10 wins. They're never happy unless you win every game. That's just the nature of the beast at Penn State, and you know that when you go there. But that's also the great thing about it, because your fan support, the people that follow your program, the people that want to be around your program, all those different things is because those are the expectations. So if they are, that's what they are, and that's something you deal with. But it's better that way than thinking, oh, you won 3 games, way to go.
Well, in 1986, Penn State was coming off 11-1, lost to Oklahoma for the national championship. John Schaefer was the starting quarterback. He'd lost 1 game to the start of the Harrisburg Patriot at a poll, and 80% of the fans wanted Schaefer benched. So, it's not new.
Right.
It's 11-1, finishing number 2 in the country, and let's get rid of the quarterback that got us there. So, it's just the way it is.
23-1 as a starter.
66 in one lifetime as a
Yeah,
starter. But and all he did was go out and win the whole thing last year.
Well, and I think to John's point about cracking that glass ceiling in the top 5, and you mentioned, of course, just go out and beat them, right? That's what you have to do. But if you look at it from Penn State's perspective, the game has changed completely, and I think Coach Franklin knows how to adjust to that change as far as bringing in resources to try and keep up. There are some schools, Clemson perhaps, we'll see what happens with Clemson over the long haul, that has not embraced the transfer portal. They ended up losing by a good amount to Georgia. Now, that's just one game. As you mentioned, Jay, you don't want to overreact to any result from week 1, but we'll see how that moves forward. But I think Coach Franklin has positioned the program and the team to not fall off and keep up with everything else that is trying to go and happen. So my point in saying all that is, you get to the playoff, and now maybe roster depth is a bigger deal. You know, you got 100 guys that you can put on scholarship. Everybody can be on scholarship, but you have limitations to the number of the roster size. So maybe it's structuring the roster to win your first playoff game, but you're going to have to go through a gauntlet of 4 teams potentially to win the playoff. So maybe there's an adjustment there. So there's always that, chess that you got to play, and hopefully everybody else is playing checkers, and you got to make those adjustments as you do that. So, John, to answer your question, we'll see. I mean, you got to run through the regular season first, get the roster in place, and everybody healthy enough, a big enough team, win your first playoff game, and then from there you're back into the bowl system, really, as far as the top 8 teams, and see if you can get yourself a win to at least get to the semifinals.
And essentially, when you look at winning this thing, you got to win. You got to beat 4 top 10 teams in a row, and so that's what it's going to take. I mean, that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Well, Todd said the magic H word: stay healthy.
Yeah.
Because they're not used to playing that many games, and there's an effect. And I think it's not like the NFL where, you can go, 11-5, get in the playoffs and still win the Super Bowl. It's not possible. You got to win them all.
And I don't think, the other thing about it is I don't think the opt-out thing is out yet.
Right.
I think there are going to be some kids on a 10-seed or 11-seed team that are going to say, 4 more games? I just played 13? I don't think that's necessarily out of the mix yet.
And that's some of the stuff that Coach Franklin is at least thinking about. Now, does it always work out? No. Sometimes the kids do opt out when you hope that they stay. But I'll give one last example of that before we move to the second question, and that's Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And, the workload between those running backs. A running back could look at it and go, hey, why am I getting more carries? Well, Coach Franklin mentioned, we're trying to make sure the guys not only stay healthy, right, as a college, but aren't worn out for the NFL. So they are thinking long-term for the athletes, for the players, for the team, and in that particular way.
But that's great as long as the H word, healthy.
Correct.
And that's kind of been Georgia's approach, whether it was under Mark Richter or even Kirby Smart. It's like, hey, you're not going to be a high mileage back. We have 2 or 3 guys we can go to. So
absolutely. So
I think that helps.
From point A, recruiting all the way to point Z, potentially, the guys having success at the NFL level, there's thinking about these things. And then, of course, it all comes down to execution. Okay, let's move on to our second question, what should we expect this year from the Final Four and the championship? And it comes from Rick. So it really just takes the discussion we just had and moves on a little bit farther. I think you start with Georgia, who hasn't lost a regular season game since 2021, maybe, something like that. It's been, a number of years now, and they play in the SEC. So you start with Georgia, and I don't say it's everybody else, but it's kind of Georgia, and then we see where it goes. I mean, we all know how impressive Ohio State's roster is. Michigan, may take a step back with Jim Harbaugh in the NFL. What I would expect is going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see who does it. And the point that I made before, who has a deep enough roster to, kind of win the battle of attrition.
Who has roster, the one, right? Because you're going to need a deep roster to go through the whole. First, you need it for the season.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Once you get through that, then these playoff games come up too. Now you've got to have a really deep roster. And I think that's the way the schedule is going to set up. You have to be able, because you're not going to be able to, just play this team. Oh, we'll get by the next game. Not a lot of. It won't be that tough. Yeah. Because once you start getting into that situation, it's going to be, it's a gauntlet.
I mean, you look at Ohio State. They'll end the season with Michigan. If they make the conference championship, they could be playing a USC or a Penn State or Oregon or Michigan again. And then, okay, now we're in the playoffs, so now we've got 3 games. Bang, bang, bang. So it's gonna be a challenge to see how it goes. Now, the interesting thing is going to be, is there going to be a team that maybe starts out 3-2 and goes on a 7-game run? They replace a quarterback, or they figure something out, or they get somebody healthy, or somebody gets a hot hand, and now they get in that playoff as a 10 seed or a 9 seed at 10-2. Can they make that run? The 1990 Penn State team opened at Texas, opened at home against Texas, lost at USC, and then went on a 9-game tear where they won at number 1 Notre Dame. They shut Alabama out in Alabama. Oh. That's a team that, if there had been a 12-team playoff, that might have been a team that made a run for the whole thing.
2016 Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, there's another one. So, these are the kind of things that are going to be interesting to see. Does somebody break through? And that's the fun of it.
Ohio State won a national championship with Cardell, third string quarterback,
and literally he took over the Michigan.
Rick, to answer Rick's question, we might see that.
Yeah,
we
I
might
think
see
the
a second
thing
stringer.
about it is going to be as you go year 1, year 2, and year 3. Do fans travel to all the games? That's a challenge. I think the other thing is if you're Penn State, whether you host a playoff game or whether you're on the road for a playoff game, if you lose that playoff game December 20th or 21st, your season's over. There is no bowl game.
Correct.
A couple of years ago, you finished third in the division, went to the Rose Bowl. Those things are gone now. So will your fan base be okay not getting that trip to Orlando or to wherever it may be, Miami, whatever it may be that time of year, because that trip might be Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Yep.
And that's nothing against Stillwater, Oklahoma, but it's just not exactly sunny and 70.
That'll be there'll be 4 teams and 4 fan bases that face that situation each year that lose that first round playoff game, and it's season over. You're not re-racking it and all of a sudden going to the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. So really fascinating stuff. And Rick, we tried to give you somewhat of a long-winded answer to the question, but what we're all expecting is just a fascinating season as we kind of all venture down this college football journey together and figure out how it works out. But we mentioned the battle of attrition. That's the last point I'll make. I mean, teams that expect to win a national championship would expect to be in their conference championship. Win or lose, you got 12 games in. You may have 5 more games against the highest quality opponents in the game left. I mean, that's a gauntlet. That is really, really difficult for anybody to run through, potentially 4, but something we haven't really seen before.
Think about Michael Penix last year against Michigan, walking off the field, battered.
Yep.
And if let's say it's the playoff, and they had won that game, he's got another game to play.
9 days later, he has to come back out.
They got to get him healthy. Yeah. And I remember Urban Meyer said to us, if you had told them in 2014 that they had to go play another 2 games after that, he said, we couldn't have done it. We were on our 3rd quarterback. He said, that's going to be a challenge of this thing.
That's what I kept saying. The depth factor to me is going to be key. And not only because as the games get going and, now plus you're not going to be able, in those type of games, your starters are playing the whole way. It's not like you can give them a rest, we got this game won, you guys sit out the 4th quarter.
And remember, next year the roster gets capped at 105, not 120. So, some of those guys that might be special teams players that were not necessarily in your top 105 in terms of offense, defense, those things become challenges. How many kickers do you have on your roster? There's a lot of change coming, so it's going to be interesting.
All right. Well, it was, we'll be here all along the way to talk about some of those changes and see how it all plays out for sure. And right now, all we know is Penn State aced their first test against West Virginia. They're 1-0, 8th-ranked team in the country. They're going to have their home opener against Bowling Green, have a week off, then they have Kent State. So for Jay Paterno, Tom Bradley, I'm Todd Sadowski. Thanks for watching our Nittany Game Week podcast. Check out everything Nittany Game Week at nittanygameweek.com. We'll see you next time.